Forget everything you've seen in Disney. Erase from your mind images of beautiful princesses singing on balconies and noble knights in shining armor. A real medieval castle had nothing in common with a romantic fairy tale. A true castle was a weapon. It was an instrument of power, a machine for suppression, and the most expensive, complex, and ambitious mega-project medieval society could possibly afford. Its construction was the equivalent of launching the Apollo space program. It demanded brilliant engineers, an army of laborers, unimaginable sums of money, and an iron political will. It could bankrupt an entire kingdom, and for 500 years, it was the most important thing a king or a lord could do. But why? How did they do it? And for crying out loud, how much did it cost? To understand why castles were necessary, you need to immerse yourself in the world that created them, a brutal and chaotic one. It all began in the 9th to 10th centuries when Charlemagne's empire collapsed and Europe was torn apart by 3 predators: the Vikings from the north, the Magyars from the east, and the Saracens from the south. There was no centralized authority, no police, no standing army that could come to the rescue. If you were a local lord, your main task was to prevent your family from being slaughtered and your villages from being burned. You needed shelter, quick, cheap, and effective. Thus, the first type of castle, the motte and bailey, was born. Its essence was simplicity. Hundreds of peasants with shovels and baskets piled up a massive artificial hill. The motte, a wooden tower, was erected on its summit, and at its base, a courtyard, the bailey, was enclosed with a wooden palisade. This was not a palace, but an emergency bunker and a livestock pen. Dirty, smelly, wooden, and highly flammable. But it could be built in a few weeks, and it perfectly accomplished its main goal. It gave the lord and his warriors a high vantage point from which to fend off raiders. By the 11th century, the situation had changed. Chaotic raids gave way to feudal wars over land. Now the task was not just to survive, but to hold territory. Wood was no longer sufficient. It rotted, and more importantly, it burned. You needed something permanent, something that would shout across the land, "This land is mine. I am the power here. Don't even think about messing with me." The era of stone castles began. William the Conqueror, upon invading England, unleashed a true shock and awe campaign, covering the country with a network of stone keeps. The Tower of London is the most famous among them. This was not defensive, but offensive construction. The castle became an anchor that the Lord cast onto conquered land. It was the most important statement. First, it was pure psychology. A massive stone edifice, visible for kilometers, served as a daily reminder to every peasant who was in charge. It was a 50-meter stone middle finger aimed at all your enemies and subjects. Second, the castle didn't sit passively. It was a forward military base from which the garrison conducted raids, controlling roads and rivers. Furthermore, it was the local Kremlin. Justice was dispensed here, taxes were collected, and the treasury was stored. And of course, in times of trouble, it became the last line of defense. Forget about comfort. The Great Hall was cold and echoing, filled with servants, soldiers, and dogs. The Lord's private chambers were small, dark, and drafty. Amenities? A hole in the floor and a small turrets, the contents of which plummeted to the base of the wall. Comfort was for weaklings. Power, that's what mattered. So imagine, you are a 12th century lord. You have money, enemies, and ambitions. You decide, I'm building. This isn't stacking blocks in Minecraft. This is the most complex logistical project of its time. It all started with choosing a location, and the main criterion was tactical advantage. The ideal spot? A high cliff, a riverband, or an island. The fewer sides that needed defending, the cheaper and more reliable it would be. The castle had to control something important: a ford, a crossroads, a mountain pass. But the main rule was one: water. Without a reliable water source within the walls, a well, or access to a river, the castle was not a fortress, but a tomb. Under siege, you would die of thirst in 3 days. The king merely gave the order and the money. All the work was done by the master mason, a rock star of his era. He was an architect, engineer, and foreman all rolled into one. A man like Master James of St. George, King Edward I's architect, was an international celebrity, lured from country to country. He knew geometry, physics, logistics, managed 1,000 workers, and held the entire blueprint in his head. And under his command worked an entire army, and these were not slaves, but highly skilled hired workers. At the construction of one castle in Wales in the late 13th century, almost 1,000 people worked simultaneously. Hundreds of masons dressing stone, quarrymen extracting it from quarries, dozens of blacksmiths and carpenters, and a huge mass of 500 to 600 diggers and laborers doing the heaviest work. This was the population of an entire town gathered at one construction site. But the real hell was logistics. Millions of tons of materials had to be delivered to the site. Stone was transported on ox carts over muddy roads, or more efficiently, by barges over water. Entire oak groves were felled for scaffolding and floorboards. And the main secret ingredient was lime mortar, medieval cement. It was produced by burning limestone in kilns for days, which required a gigantic amount of firewood. And this entire horde of workers had to be fed and watered, meaning a second army was needed: bakers, brewers, and farmers. Construction took years, averaging from 4 to 10 years. First, the moat was dug, then the main tower, the keep, was erected. After that, the outer walls and towers were raised using wooden cranes operating on a squirrel cage principle. Early square towers gave way to round ones. They had no vulnerable corners and offered a 360-degree view. The pinnacle of engineering was the concentric castle, a castle within a castle. If the enemy breached the low outer wall, they found themselves in a kill zone, under crossfire from the high inner wall. And now for the most interesting part: the price. The short answer is obscenely expensive. So much so that it could bring an entire kingdom to its knees. The 8 castles that Edward I built in Wales cost him approximately £80,000 sterling. To understand the scale, you need to know that the entire annual income of the English crown at that time was about £25,000. Edward spent an amount equal to 3 to 4 annual budgets of the entire country on his castles. One single harlot castle cost as much as the annual income of 400 minor knights combined. Where did the money come from? From ruthless taxes, huge debts to Italian bankers, and the confiscation of property from Jews expelled from the country. Castle building was an economic war. For 500 years, the castle was the king of the battlefield. And then, everything changed. In the 15th century, it acquired 2 mortal enemies. The first was the cannon. In 1453, the Turks captured Constantinople, breaching its 1,000-year-old walls with giant bombardments. This was a signal. High stone walls, perfect against ladders, became perfect targets for cannonballs. Castles mutated into low, thick star forts, but that was a different story. But the true killer of the castle was peace. By the 16th century, the era of feudal fragmentation had ended. Kings created professional armies with their own artillery. Private castles became not just useless, but dangerous to central authority. Their military function died. The aristocracy still wanted to display their status, but no longer through brutal force, but through luxury. Instead of thick walls, they began to spend money on enormous windows, ballrooms, and parks. The cold, dark fortress transformed into a luxurious and comfortable palace. Thus ended the 500-year history of the castle. It was born out of chaos as a wooden panic room, grew into a stone giant, the pinnacle of engineering and a symbol of power. And when the world changed, when gunpowder made its walls fragile and centralized power rendered it unnecessary, it died. Today, castles are beautiful ruins and tourist attractions, but they remain silent monuments to a brutal era. They are not a fairy tale. They are a chronicle of power, fear, genius, and the incredible price people were willing to pay to prove one thing: I am in charge here, frozen in stone.